A privilege is something that someone or some entity of higher authority allows you to do. For example, if I walk out of the back door of my house, I can walk back and forth on my land, and I'm not required to ask anyone. I have a right to walk back and forth on my land. If I wanted to walk to the store and I would have to walk across your land to get there, I'd have to get your permission. And on Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, you can say, "Sure, Mike, no problem. What are friends for?" But on Thursday, you wake up in a bad mood, you can deny me permission. You can say, "Walk around." That's what fences are for. And so the important distinction is that a privilege is something which you grant to me, and you can deny me anytime you want. So we have a right to freedom of religion. We have a right to freedom of speech. The First Amendment does not grant us those privileges. The First Amendment does not say you are allowed to attend any church that you want. What the First Amendment does say is that Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion, indicating that the First Amendment is further limitations on the power of government.
So the Bill of Rights then is a further set of rules for the government on what they can and cannot do?
Absolutely. And most people are aware that the Constitution has a preamble. Most of us memorized it as children. We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, etc. What most Americans do not know is that the Bill of Rights also has a preamble. And it specifically states that in an effort to prevent misconstruction or abuse of government power, that further declarative and restrictive clauses shall be added. If I make a declaration, am I asking for permission? Did we write the Declaration of Independence and ask King George if it was okay to start our own country? A declaration is a statement, a clear, defined statement. And restrictive clauses are ones that put limitations on the authority of government. And so if people were to become more familiar with the preamble to the Bill of Rights, I think that the general purpose of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights would become very clear.
So if the government made a law restricting marriage between a man and a woman, would that be a law establishing or respecting one person's interpretation of Christianity over another's?
Well, that's what they would be trying to do, but such an amendment to the Constitution that defined marriage or tried to impose a certain set of morality on all Americans would be unconstitutional, and it would violate a Supreme Court decision that was handed down in 1803 known as Marbury versus Madison. And this very famous Supreme Court decision indicated that any law repugnant to the Constitution is null and void, and is in fact no law. If, for example, one of the states were to suddenly decide that slavery was legal and they passed a law indicating that it was okay to subjugate a particular race or subset of the population, it may be on paper, there may have been a majority of people who supported it, but it would not be constitutional. It would be an invalid proclamation.
Another thing that comes to mind is a very controversial topic now in America, which is abortion. Now, Roe versus Wade is based on an implied privacy in the Constitution. Where does that lie?
Well, abortion is a very difficult issue, and it has divided the nation, and it also divides the Libertarian Party. The platform of the Libertarian Party is based on individual ownership, the assumption that you own your own body. And we as Americans take that for granted, but it's not a universal assumption. It wasn't assumed that blacks owned their bodies in the early forming of the United States. Women in the Middle East currently do not own their body, and they are sold and traded. Children around the world are currently sold into slavery. So although we in the United States hold that you own your own body, that is not a universal concept. The current libertarian platform is one of pro-choice, the feeling that the woman owns her own body and that the government has no authority to tell her what she can do with her body. And the problem is that even within the Libertarian Party, there are many people who are concerned about the baby's ownership. And that is really the question that is being asked. When does the baby take ownership of its own body? When does it assume the right to life and the other rights that are associated with life? And that is really the question that is being debated right now.
What about this implied privacy? Where does that lie in the Constitution, that the privacy, this idea that holds up Roe versus Wade at this point?
Well, the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution is the amendment that protects your privacy. It says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause. So you have a right to be left alone. And the government does not have the authority to come in and search through your sock drawer or look under your bed just because it would be convenient for the government. Making laws that make things convenient for the government are in opposition to the Constitution. Thomas Jefferson indicated that we should bind men down with the chains of the Constitution. He didn't suggest that we should kind of loosely irritate the government with the bungee cord of the Constitution. And so there are specific things that government is not allowed to do. And in any question between government and people, we should always find in favor of the people.
So it seems now with the Patriot Act, you mentioned, it seems that the government is kind of bungee jumping with our rights. They're really stretching the cord very, very thin with the Patriot Act. How does the Patriot Act violate the Constitution?
Well, the Patriot Act presumes to give government agents the authority to search your house without a warrant. It claims that they don't have to give you a warrant or show you this warrant until 90 days after the search, which I find completely ludicrous. If you haven't complained in the first 3 months, the likelihood that the government is going to fess up and present you with this warrant after 90 days is absolutely, naive. The other violation of our constitutional rights is the Sixth Amendment. Presumably, under the Patriot Act, government can label you a terrorist. And simply because they have labeled you a terrorist, they can throw you in jail without an indictment for an indefinite period of time. You're not allowed a phone call to tell your family where you're at, and you have no due process. You have no assistance of counsel for your defense. And this flies in the face of what Americans are all about. We all know that a person in the United States is innocent until proven guilty. And so by that standard, it would be impossible for anyone to be a terrorist until after the trial.
Also, I wonder who would next be labeled as a terrorist? A drug dealer, someone that disagreed with the government on certain issues? I worry about that definition, because it is very loose. What exactly is a terrorist?
The most dangerous thing about the Patriot Act is that it opens the door for the government to suspect other people for other things and to violate everyone's due process of law. If Americans are truly concerned about liberty, we should extend that liberty to everyone. If someone really is a terrorist, giving them a trial, giving them a lawyer, allowing them to contact people and, establish a defense is not going to prevent us from putting them in jail and finding, after we find them guilty. But there's a very dangerous precedent when we allow the government to supersede the constitutional limitations.
Now, when they wanted to make during Prohibition, an era known as Prohibition in this country, we used